Good day, everyone. I know a couple of us might be still on the way coming to join this wonderful event that is organized by the First Class Leaders Network. On behalf of the organization, I will just take a 1 minute to tell Dr. Janet what this organization is all about. So basically, it's just a group of first-class students from Nigeria that are together to kind of create a bridge between lack of appreciation of excellence in Nigeria by creating opportunity for the young minds that are just recent graduates to get offers and greater opportunities overseas. So we organize this event to kind of train them on how to write effective personal statement and academic CV. We've had a couple of this before, but going through your profile, I'm like, oh God, this is the best person to do this. For those of us who don't know Dr. Janet, I will talk about her in the next 1 minute. She is the Associate Dean of Academic and Student Affairs at Rutgers University. And you might want to know that she has been doing that for the past 11 years. That is from 2009 till date. When I was going through her profile, I was kind of excited. First and foremost, I realized that she actually had her bachelor's degree when I was 1 year old. That was far back in 1989.
Thanks for making me feel old.
Yeah, I was just 1 year old, and then amazingly had a PhD in 1994. Oh my God, I can't even remember what I was doing then. And ever since, she has been doing amazing things at Rutgers University. Ever since I could remember, when I saw her profile, I saw she was an associate professor in 1999, and since 1999 till date, or with other stories I don't want to talk about because of time, she has been doing amazing things at Rutgers, especially in the iJobs program. For those of you who want to know more about it, you can actually Google iJobs at Rutgers. She's one of the big voices in iJobs at Rutgers. She has also been able to serve in several panels that are actually reviewing both applications as well as grants. And I remember I have been under her tutelage when I was learning how to write during the grant writing and workshop. So it is amazing to have you, Dr. Janet, and it is a privilege to have you spend this little time with us. So without really jumping into so much of your time, because this is 9:33, I would like to hand over the slides to you to please take over. Over to you.
So I guess you need to stop sharing your screen first.
Oh, really?
And then
okay.
I can, yeah.
Great.
So before I share my screen, first of all, Sam and Nydia, thank you so much for inviting me. It's truly an honor to meet all of you virtually and share whatever small advice I can about applying to graduate school in terms of your personal statement and your CV. I just would love if you guys wanted to share your reaction. How many of you give the thumbs up if you are thinking about applying to PhD programs? You know, the thumbs up motion. All right, I'm seeing a couple. Great. And so I hope that some of this advice will be helpful to you. I want to keep this informal. So if you have questions along the way, please feel free to type them into the chat. And Nydia and Sam will keep me on my toes to see if there's any questions coming through the chat. We'll get started. So let me share my screen. So, yeah, you know, applying to graduate school is an interesting process. Mostly what is important to differentiate yourself from another applicant is to highlight your research experience. This is the general advice I'd have. Highlight your research experience. We're really looking for people who know what graduate school is all about. We don't want people who just think it might be fun to try going to graduate school and they're not sure if it's the right move for them, because it's a very long process. It's a very difficult process to be in graduate school, and therefore knowing that you're making the right decision is really important. So we want to get that message that this is something that's really your goal in your life. So as Sam said, I'm an assistant dean in the School of Graduate Studies, and I'm a faculty in the Department of Neuroscience and Cell Biology. So if you have any questions about neuroscience in particular, I'm happy to answer those. And this is my email address that you can reach out to me with afterwards. So we're just going to take a little quiz. So in your head, you can answer these questions. So true or false, should you apply first for a master's and decide later about a PhD? In my opinion, I don't know what you think, but it's really important to, as I said, have the big picture in mind. So if you think you want to eventually be a faculty member or work at a high level in an industry, pharmaceutical company, then you really should go straight to your PhD. If you're not sure about those long-term goals, then it's absolutely a perfect solution to apply to a master's and then transfer into a PhD program later on. Do you need to know exactly what research you're going to do when you go to grad school? Absolutely not. I actually had no idea what I was going to study in graduate school. I did 3 rotations and I ended up picking a lab that I never thought I would have been interested in. So definitely you don't have to know exactly what your plans are for the research. If you get a PhD, my only career option will be a professor. That is false. Also, all 3 of these are false. You can have many careers with a PhD. Sam mentioned the iJobs program. I'm happy to talk about that a little bit later on. So, but you can explore lots of things in terms of your career path when you're in graduate school. Financially, I would do better by working after my bachelor's rather than paying to go to grad school and deferring employment. Again, you can get a stipend while in graduate school, so you do not have to pay for a PhD program. You would get stipend and you would get your tuition covered. So it's not necessarily true that you need to work to earn money before going to graduate school. Graduate school at a large institution will be impersonal. That is also false. So all of these are false so far. And the truth is that Rutgers is a large university and we all know each other very well. I know Sam and Nydia quite well. We form a tight group and we all help each other out. And finally, I should start thinking about graduate school in the spring of junior year. I would say that that is false. You should be thinking about graduate school from freshman year of college because you need to be planning and getting research experience. So far, if any of you answer those true, then you need to rethink your decision about the answers. Okay, so what are the components of the application? There's the form, there's a personal statement, there are usually 3 letters of recommendation, you submit your transcript. Some programs still require GREs, many do not, so check that. Writing sample, sorry? Writing sample, sometimes yours required, a CV is usually required, and then there's an application fee. And sometimes you can get that application fee waived. So look at that. So let's dig into the personal statement. So the most important parts of the personal statement are, what have you done so far? And it's really important to talk about your research experience to date. Then what do you want? I'm going to go through more in detail. This is just a big overview. What do you want to do? That is, what are your plans for graduate school in terms of general areas that you'd like to learn more about? Again, you do not have to know specifically what you want to do. And what do you want to do long term? Do you want to become a faculty member? Do you prefer to think about working in a pharmaceutical company? Then also, why are you applying to this particular graduate school and this particular graduate program? So we're going to talk about each of those. It's important to show that you are a good fit for that institution and that you're motivated to be successful in graduate school and how you're going to succeed. So if you've overcome some obstacles in your life, tell us about that and show us that you can rise above any issues that you might encounter in graduate school because you have past experience doing that in a successful way. Make sure that your personal statement is very well written, and have your mentors and friends look it over so that you make sure that there's no errors and that you're really putting your best foot forward. It's important not to like mix up the names of the institutions and say like, oh, I want to go to Rutgers University, and then somewhere else your application mentions Hunter College and you forgot to edit it and fix it up. So that's a big red flag. So make sure everybody checks that. Okay, so let's go a little bit more through your personal statement. What have you done in your proposed field of study? So if I'm interested in neuroscience, I want to talk about experience I have in neuroscience. I may have done plant biology for a little while, but I'm not going to get accepted to a program in neuroscience unless I explain that I have some neuroscience experience. So when you talk about your research projects, talk about how you yourself were essential to that project. What was your role? And we don't want to just hear that you were the one who ran the DNA gels. We want to hear that you were involved in some of the thought process and you were, analyzing the gels and you were deciding about what the next experiment would be. So really the intellectual contribution is important just as much as the technical contribution. And how did your contribution fit into the big picture of the project? So it's important for you to be able to say, what is the big picture of the project? So talk about the hypothesis. Don't just get into the nitty-gritty of the project itself, but zoom out. Why are you studying this particular question? How does it fit into the what the lab is working on in general? So the lab's project and how it's important in biology, your hypothesis, and how it fits into that. If you were writing a paper or for something like that, that really you have to talk about what your contribution was to that paper. Did you write the results section and make the figures? How did you participate in that process? Also, you want to talk about in the relationship to your research, did you do any volunteer work or service? So for example, if there was a collaboration between two labs, how did you play a role in facilitating that collaboration? So that would be the details of your service in your research. Then for the part of what do you want to do and why, if you're going to continue in that field, talk about which area you're interested in, specify the topic. And you want to become a researcher or scholar in this particular field. So really dig into that field. You, again, do not have to say exactly what your project will be about in graduate school, but why are you interested in biomedical engineering or something like that? And then again, why Rutgers or whatever school you're applying to, and why this program? So talk about specific things. Look on the websites and see, maybe this program has a really good professional and career development aspect. So that's something you want to highlight. That I'm really interested in applying because of the iJobs program, for example, or I'm really interested in applying to Rutgers because they have a particular strength in traumatic brain injury research, whatever it is that is appealing to you. And then when you talk about that, you might want to specify, or you should specify, faculty that are doing research that fits with your interests. So I really want to work in so-and-so's lab because, and this is important, why so-and-so's lab? Because her research on traumatic brain injury is important for I'm interested in regeneration methods and how the central nervous system could be manipulated to regenerate. So talk about how that faculty's and research interests you. Make sure you read the instructions. Personal statements sometimes have very specific instructions. So make sure you're answering the questions that they're really asking. Oops, sorry. There's a typo here. Make a case for why you're qualified to be the faculty mentor's apprentice working under them and productive in their research group. How are you going to contribute to the university? What skills are you bringing to the university? Again, highlight your research experience. Show that you can work independently. So in the past, have you been given an assignment in a lab and you were able to do it without needing assistance? But importantly, that you're also good at working on a team so that you've worked with other people on their projects and that together you make a stronger team. Make sure that you use, when you write this, a style that is yours. Don't try to be too funny or to be using fancy language if that's not your style. It's more important for the reader to get to the information that's relevant to the application than to be distracted by fancy quotes or stories that are really not relevant to graduate school. Everybody likes to start off with why they got interested in science in the first place. Maybe when you were a child, you like to mix different concoctions together. That's fine, but you don't want to spend a lot of time on it. It's more important to say maybe that when you were in college and you were working in a lab and you discovered something or you got a result and how that was transformative and how that has helped you make the decision to go to graduate school. That would be a more relevant story than mixing concoctions or having a grandmother who was sick with a particular disease. Everybody starts off their personal statements that way. And to be honest, after a while, it just gets to be very repetitive. So try to start off with something that's a little bit more unique. Be clear and explain what you want to do, why you want to do it, how you're going to do it, how you're going to be successful, and what you plan to do after your degree. So those are some of the things that I already touched on. Typically, the personal statement would be about 2 pages max. I think 1 page is a good goal. Sometimes universities will have a limit on how long it can be. It's always better to keep it tight and not get too long because people will get distracted and not read the whole thing. So I kind of mentioned this. What happened in your life that made you study what you studied? Like, why are you in science? Any research or internship experience we've talked about. How did you conduct your research? What was your particular role? I kind of mentioned that already. You were running the gels, and why was that important? So what level should the science be described in? This is a tricky thing because you want to hit the right balance. You want to make it so though both a layperson like your grandmother as well as somebody who is a scientist such as your research advisor should be able to understand it. So that's why you need to, what I do talk about is the funnel. You want to start with a very big overview. What is the context in which your research is going? And then go more narrow down to the details and the granular components of your research. So really make sure that you are starting at this high level and going down to the more detailed. Make sure you also talk in your personal statement about your extracurricular activities and your volunteer activities and your leadership. Maybe you've been in a club in college and you were the president or secretary or something of that club, or the treasurer. Talk about it and how it has helped create who you are. And again, how do you fit into a specific program at the university that you're applying to? Some do's and don'ts. Do be authentic. As I said, don't use quotes if that's not your style. Be sure to brag a little. So this is important. You don't want to be too overinflated of what you are, but be sure that you highlight everything that you have done. Don't forget, even if it's a small thing, it could be important in the big picture. So try to make sure that you are representing yourself in the best light that you can. And also make sure that the statement gets reviewed by several people. That's an important do. Don't use flowery language or unnecessary adjectives. Don't embellish. So this is important, that if you did something, you don't want to make it more than what it really was, because you'll get called out on that. Somebody may say to you, oh, tell me about this and that. But if it really wasn't accurate, then you're going to get stuck and you won't be able to explain how you participated in that activity accurately. And similar to about the do brag, you also don't want to underestimate yourself, right? So it's the same concept. Don't be self-deprecating. Make sure that you are able to talk about yourself in a very positive way. And okay, just to one slide about recommendations. It's really important that you get recommendations from people who know you well, who can really talk about your research. And if it's somebody who's a professor in a class, you want to make sure that it was an advanced class, not an introductory level class, and that it's an inquiry-based course. In other words, something where some intellectual processes had to occur rather than just pure memorization, so that the professor can talk about how you think and how you process information and then convey it back out. And if you want to get a letter of recommendation from somebody who you did volunteer work or service with, make sure that it's relevant to the research. If it's something where you volunteered at a children's daycare, that's not relevant to research. So don't include that letter of recommendation. So these are examples of people who could write you letters of recommendation. Your summer research, somebody where you took an upper level class, and it should be somebody who's knows you well and can say more than, you got an A in the class, who can really talk about you as an individual. Make sure it's not a TA. We want the professor, not the TA, to write the letter. Make sure that your letters are going to be strong. So ask the person, can you write me a strong letter? This is an important question to ask them. If they say they don't know you well enough or that they don't think highly of you, then the letter's not going to be good. Make sure you give them information on the school and program that you're applying to. Give them your personal statement so they can read and learn more about you. Explain anything you want the writer to cover, emphasize, give them lots of lead time, and have a backup fourth person in case one of them falls through and doesn't submit in time. Okay. Any questions about personal statements or letters of recommendation? I can see there's a lot in the chat, but I don't know if that's anything. Question. Nope. Any questions? You can also unmute and ask if you want. Okay. I'll move on to then CV versus.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Dr. Dennett.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was difficult navigating to where the unmute button was.
Okay.
All right. I asked a specific question earlier when you spoke about personal statement, I said you spoke mostly about labs. What about someone like me who is from a different program, not lab based, for example, mathematics?
Uh-huh.
So you will I say you kind of didn't consider someone like me? Yeah, so that's my question.
Right. So for mathematics, or places where you don't have lab experience, have you been working with a professor, or what have you been doing to get experience?
So let's say someone like me who just concluded with his undergraduate program,
Mhm.
and most of what I have done is uh, my final year project, something like that.
Okay, that's great. That's perfect. So you should talk about that project and why you picked the topic. What kind of background did you have to do, writing and research and analysis, before you were able to write the project up? And did you present the project at the end to make a poster or a talk, any of those kinds of things, and what you learned by doing the project, what you would do next if you were to continue that project, or what new area that project led you to become interested in. Did you work with a professor for that project?
Yes, was a supervisor.
Supervisor, right. So do any of those things that I just said make sense? I mean, you just talk about how you picked the topic, what you did to get through the whole analysis and project, and then where you would take it next, I think. Is that okay?
Very fine, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
Yes, Janet, there is. So do
Mhm.
personal statements have to evoke some kind of emotion
They
to
do
whoever is
not.
reading them?
No, personal statements do not have to evoke an emotion. If you are applying to medical school, I would say that's a different story. If you're applying to medical school, you do want a little bit of emotion, because you want to show some connection to the patients and how helping patients makes you feel. I would say that for graduate school, it's pretty cut and dry, in the sense that it's just factual. The only small emotional component might be how you feel when you are successful in research, or how you feel when you're not successful in research and yet you're interested in continuing to do research, because the long-term goal is to discover something new. But I would stay away from too much drama and emotion.
All right then. Perfect. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Another question?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Please, yeah, I want to ask, what if most of your tutors are not, or probably the lecturers that knows you very well, they are not professors? Uh, how do you go about the recommendation letter?
So most of the people you know are tutors and not professors. Is that what you said?
Yeah, some of them are associate professor, but not professor.
Oh, okay. It's okay if they are not a full professor. If they are faculty of any level, it's fine. So I guess my point is, if it's another student, like a graduate student or an undergraduate student, you wouldn't want them to write the letter. But if it's a faculty member, then it's fine. If you don't know the faculty member that well, because you were working more with a TA, for example, then ask the TA and the faculty member to work together to write the letter, and have the letter signed by the faculty member, so that it looks like it's coming from the faculty member, even if some of the content came from the TA.
Okay. And then concerning the extracurricular activities, if maybe the activity that you are involved in is maybe does not directly uh is in line with the probably your intended research, your intended research area that you are applying to, is it necessary that you also probably write it with maybe how you work together with people? Probably like me, for example, I do set up instruments and some other electrical appliances as a kind of volunteer activity. Is this what now it doesn't necessarily apply to what I want to research in? Should I also include such things like that?
So you don't have to necessarily include it in the personal statement, but you could include it in your CV. So that would be a place to put it. If it is not directly related to research, but you feel like you learned an important skill doing it, and that skill could help you in research, then I would include it. So let's say whatever your work or extracurricular work required a lot of organization. Even if the organization was not related to science, you could say that by doing this volunteer work and gaining organizational skills, that has helped me in my research, because research requires us to be organized. So take what we call the transferable skills that you have learned in your extracurricular activities and apply how they will apply to your research. Another example would be leadership. Let's say you were the leader of your sports team. Well, sports has nothing to do with research, but being a leader is important for research, because by being a leader, you are now able in your research to help supervise or mentor other students when you are given that responsibility, for example, right? So those are soft skills. You've learned to communicate well with other people, because as the captain of your sports team, you have to explain to your teammates what the next play is going to be. And communication is important in a research setting, because it's important to make sure everybody who's involved in the project is on the same page as far as where the project is going. Do you understand? So take those soft skills: leadership, teamwork, communications, organization, project management. All of those can apply to research. Okay, so use those skills and explain them.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, I'm going to move on. We can take more questions later. Or does somebody have a question?
Yes, Dr.
Hello.
Janet.
Yes, okay.
I think Gift has a question. Yeah.
Yeah, good afternoon, Dr. Janet. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. We have some questions from the YouTube Live. Someone has asked, if my school has given a particular direction for the personal statement, should I follow it strictly, or is there room for flexibility? And then still following up on that question, someone else has asked, what if the research they've done in the past is different from what they're interested in doing in graduate school? How do they create that connection?
Okay, great questions. So first of all, the first one is, if the question, how much flexibility is there in terms of addressing the personal statement questions? I would not stray too far from their questions. If they've actually created specific things they want you to address, I would definitely address those first. And if you have extra room, then you can add more. But there's a reason that they created those questions. So they would be appreciative if you probably stuck to that and didn't stray too far from it. So that's the first question. The second question was, what if you want to go into a new area? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. So what if my previous research experience is different from what I currently want to go into in graduate school?
Okay, that's fine. I would still talk about your previous research experience, but then it's very, very important that you help the reader of your personal statement understand the transition to the new area. So what is it that led you to apply to this new program and that's in a new area of research? And are any like, where did that interest generate from? And are any of the skills that you learned in your previous research going to be helpful in your new research? So even if the topic is different, what skills have you learned in terms of the scientific process, asking, forming a hypothesis, designing experiments or projects that will test that hypothesis? All of those things are true regardless of the discipline, right? So help the reader understand why you're transitioning and how the transition will be facilitated. In other words, what issues do you anticipate in the transition, and how are you going to make sure that those issues don't cause problems? So if you're transitioning to a whole new area and you have no background in that new area, what are you going to do to prepare yourself? Are you going to take a class over the summer to learn more about that new area? Are you going to read a textbook? Are you going to watch tutorials? How are you going to prepare so that you will be successful in the new area? And what skills from the old area will help you in the new area? Okay. Any other questions? These are great questions, guys.
Yeah, I have
So,
a.
hi. Hello. Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes, Aikina.
All right. So I want to ask a question, and it's about signature on a letter. For example, I had a scholarship I was supposed to apply to or for, and the lecturer said she could not sign on the letter because of the COVID, so she was only able to type the letter without a signature. What do you think about this?
Can she sign and scan it?
She said she could not do that, that she's only able to type the letter. And in fact, it was not on a letter-headed paper of the university because she said she could not get to school to access one of them. So I don't know. She just sent it like that, and she expects me to use it that way.
And so you haven't seen the letter, right? Or you did see the letter?
I have seen the letter, but it's not signed. It's not on a letter-headed paper of the university either.
Yeah, that's not ideal. I guess the only thing she could do maybe is put her phone number and say, if with an explanation about what, first of all, if there's an explanation in the letter why it's not on letterhead and why it's not signed because of COVID, she has no access, etc., and a phone number or an email that if somebody questions the validity of the letter, that somebody could call it or email her and confirm it.
Okay, yes. So the number is there, and our university's email is as well there.
Okay. I think
All
that
right.
should be fine. I mean, we're all living in a crazy world right now, so people are going to be more understanding and forgiving.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much.
Sure. I want to move on. I'm sorry, Bonaventure, you have a question?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead.
Is it necessary to list out your maybe awards and accolades, maybe some of them you had while you were in school or that?
That's an excellent question. That's where I'm going to go right now. Okay. I'm going to do resumes and CVs.
Okay.
So that would not go into your personal statement. That would go into your CV. Okay.
Hello. Okay.
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Hello, I have a
Okay, in addition to the previous question, can a digital signature be utilized?
Yes, I think a digital signature is fine.
All right, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Hello.
Thank you very much. Hello. Thank you for the presentation, Janet.
Hello.
Aikina's talking, I think. Yeah.
Hello.
Thank you for the presentation, Janet. So can you say the difference between a personal statement and a statement of purpose, please? Thank you.
Yeah. A personal statement, I think, is more a story about your past experiences. A statement of purpose is more focused on what your goal is in the future program that you're applying to. But there's a fine line between them, I think. And I'm not an expert necessarily in that. So if you want, I can get you more details. Just feel free to reach out to me by email and I'll try to get you more details. But that's my understanding.
Yes, please.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Janet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure. Go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can also.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. I would like to know, for example, if you're going to file in your recommendation letter, usually you have to file in 3 recommendation letters from 3 different professors who have, different views about you. Of course, the 3 cannot have to the same extent, the same impression about you. For example, you might do so well in a particular professor, subject. Why the rest, you might not really have a strong result in terms of the courses you took while you were in school. So how do I balance up the content of my recommendation letter, given the fact that I'm going to send it across to 3 different people who are supposed to give 3 different impression about me, to boost my application. Thank you.
Sure. I lost your voice for a little bit, but I'm not so sure that you need to think about it as 3 different viewpoints of you. It could be 3 very similar viewpoints, but just coming from different people. So I'm not sure what your concern is specifically. Like, you can ask your research advisor, a professor, and maybe somebody that you worked with in another context. But you don't have to stress about making sure they each convey a different aspect of you or your personality or your work ethic. It's just 3 people who know you well. I'm sorry if I'm not understanding your question. I mean, you don't want necessarily 3 people from the same lab. You want 1 person from 1 lab, 1 person or work experience, 1 person from another, like a faculty member who was a professor in a course. But is that okay? I'm not sure what your question was. All right, I'm going to move on to resume and CV. So resume is usually, I'm just going to keep going, guys, because I need to leave in 15 minutes or so. Resume is usually quite short. It's usually 1 or 2 pages, and it has a very clean layout, and it highlights your work experience and skills. And you want to create a new version of your resume for each thing that you're applying to, so that you highlight things and experiences that are relevant for that position, either that job or graduate program, etc. So the beginning, usually you have a summary of qualifications, then you go to your work experience, then you talk about your education, then you talk about your technical and non-technical skills, your awards and honors, and your publications and presentations. A CV, on the other hand, which is what you'll use to apply to graduate school, usually can be as long as is needed. There's no limit on space, and it includes everything you have ever done. So that would start with your education, then talk about your positions and research experience, then your professional organizations, any honors and awards you've gotten, your teaching experience, any fellowships and grants that you've gotten, any publications or abstracts, any presentations, that'd be oral or poster, and then any activities or service that you've been involved with. So you want to make sure at the beginning that you have your contact information. It's good to have your name, email address. You can put a mailing address. You don't have to these days if you don't want to, but make sure you're only putting one if you do put one. You can put your phone number, and it's good to have a LinkedIn profile up at the top as well. For your education, you want to go in reverse chronological order. So your most current degree or most recent degree at the top, and then going backwards till you were younger. You want to talk about which degree did you get? Is it a bachelor's of arts, bachelor's of science, master's, etc.? What the name of the institution is? Was it in math, physics, biology, etc.? What date it was awarded? And if you had a thesis, the title of it, or a project, what the project was, and who your advisor was for that. For your relevant experience, you want to talk about your research and research interests, any teaching that you have done or tutoring, any professional experiences you've had. And for each one of these, you want to include what your title was. You were a research assistant, you were a student researcher, the organization's name, the dates that you held the position, and then have bullet points that summarize what your duties and activities were, and highlighting our accomplishments and success. And it's really important to use action verbs. So like explored, examined, studied at the beginning of the sentence, and then what you did. For the projects themselves, you want to list the name of the project if it had a title, where the research was conducted, the names of the research are in the lab, and you can describe the technique or the purpose of the study as well as your responsibilities and duties. So for each of your research involvement or projects, you want to cover all of this. For your teaching and tutorial, you want to again go in reverse chronological order. You want to name the name of the course and the number of the course from the catalog, the institution, the university at which it was taught, and make sure that you separate the classes where you're a teaching assistant or where you were an instructor. If you've given presentations and publications, make sure that you have the title of the poster or the talk, where you presented it. It was at the annual student research day, for example, the date of that and the location, and a very brief description. For your professional experience, what was it that you did? Did you plan a conference? Did you do some consulting or tutoring or mentoring? Did you have administrative jobs that you were involved in? Did you play a role in a committee? So talk about all of those professional experiences. For honors and awards, you want to say if you got any fellowships or scholarships, if you've been in any academic honor societies, if you've gotten any grants. Sometimes undergraduates have some small grants that they've gotten, and if you've gotten any honors for teaching or any other types of honors. If you've played any role in the university, maybe this would not be relevant for you now, but as you go through your career, you might be involved in some committees for your department or your university, or even at the larger level for your profession. So this probably won't apply to you yet, but it's good to know that it's one of the components of a CV. If you know any languages, it's good to mention them here. And these are the listings of the level of proficiency. So either you have reading knowledge, speaking knowledge, you're proficient, you're fluent, or you're a native speaker. So use one of those, say like Spanish proficient or Spanish fluent, so people know. And finally, if you have a membership in scholarly or professional organizations, you should name the organization, like I belong to the Society for Neuroscience, the dates that I've been a member, and if I've held any offices, which I have not. So make sure that your document is visually appealing. You don't want it to be filled with words. You need to leave white space for eyes to be able to find the important information. And make sure that the most important stuff is at the top or on the left side. Some people make a column on the left to highlight the top information. Don't use too many different kinds of fonts or bold and italics. It gets to be very hard for the eyes to follow. But if you have something you really want to draw attention to, then you can use that. Make sure it's very concise, not too wordy. And again, just like your personal statement, make sure it's proofread many times until it's flawless. So this is an example resume. And what you'll notice is that there's this professional summary or summary of qualifications at the top. And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. But you see, because it's a resume, she's highlighting her work experience first before her education, because this is a resume that she's applying for a job. When you apply for graduate school, you're going to have more of a list of your CV, which are all the things that I mentioned before. So summary of qualifications is a useful thing for a resume. You want to highlight a transferable skill, then a technical experience that you've had, and an outcome. So for example, you have strong leadership skills. That's a transferable skill. Remember, I mentioned leadership, teamwork, collaboration, communication, project management, organization. So this person says they have strong leadership skills managing research professionals on collaborative projects resulting in 8 publications and $250,000 in lab grant funding. So that's a quantified result. And here's another version. Transferable skill is an innovator with expertise in bioinformatics, that's a technical experience, and nanotechnology, as evidenced by the outcome is 3 patents and the recent discovery of 2 new medical treatments involving composite microspheres. Obviously, you guys aren't going to have this kind of stuff yet. So you should try to figure out what you've done. You have done research in engineering, for example, and you have how many years of experience? What are the techniques that you know? And what happened? Did you get to present a poster on it? Did you help write a paper? Something that you can talk about. So these are examples, summary of qualifications that you can look at. Here's another one. These are obviously people who are very accomplished, who have spent many years in the field, but you can tone it down to your level of what you've been able to do as a student to date, okay? And then just LinkedIn is an important thing. I suggest everybody prepare a LinkedIn profile with a professional headshot using a sort of a summary of qualifications similar that I just described to you. Have a piece of information about you that people will remember that makes you stand out, your work experience, make sure that you have a lot of connections, use keywords, talk about your completed projects, request that others link in with you, and then make sure that you stay active by posting or commenting on other people's posts. So I'm not going to spend time on LinkedIn because that wasn't the goal of today. But these are sample LinkedIn profiles from our students that you can see really stand out and pop because they have personalized it. Here's another one. He's a postdoctoral researcher. So you can see here, he's a broadly experienced molecular pharmacologist with a deep understanding in diverse scientific fields and significant experience vetting and applying emergent technologies in a laboratory setting. All right, I'm going to end because we do not have time for the interview part, and it's not what I said I was going to talk about. So I'll just take questions in the last 5 minutes.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you for a good talk.
Any questions, guys?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm having problems because most of my teachers don't speak English. I study in Russia, so most of them are having difficulties sending the recommendation letters and also my transcript. All these things I have to kind of translate. And I don't know, the transcript is in my control, but my teachers, I don't know how I could help with their recommendation letters.
Yeah, do they have colleagues who could help them translate their letters to English?
No, not really.
They don't, the faculty who are writing your letters don't even have friends or anyone else who can translate?
There are professional organizations that do that, but then they'll have to pay and they're not open to that.
I see. To be honest, I've never encountered this problem. I don't know. Is there, I guess, yeah, somebody would have to pay to do this. Are you able to pay yourself or get funding for it?
Yeah, I could. Okay.
Because if you send the letter in Russian, none of the people reviewing it are going to be able to read it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's the
Yeah.
problem.
Hello, I have a question.
Yes, Eric?
Yeah, if you're applying for a grad school and you're asked to write a research proposal and you don't really have a particular topic in mind, as you said, how do you go about it? Or do you decline applying?
You can just write about what you would be interested in studying, like theoretically. It doesn't have to be specific or detailed, I think. It can be a broad picture of what interests you. Does it have to be specific, or you think, or is it an option to talk more generally?
To submit a research proposal, like you're asked to submit probably maybe 2 or 3 pages or so.
Oh, if you need to submit figures and you don't have any data or research to make it, then you might have to decline, right?
Okay. Hi, Dr. Janet. Sorry for cutting in. Thank you so much for your time. I know how busy your time is, and we have actually spent overtime. You told us you will be available for 45 minutes, and I guess we are almost an hour right now.
Okay.
Yeah, for questions that are specific into, for questions that are very, very specific about whatsoever we've learned today, ladies and gentlemen, you can feel free to reach us either through our YouTube page, or you can check us on Twitter and drop your questions. And if there are questions that we will not be able to answer directly based on the experience we've all learned from Dr. Janet today, then we can actually assure you that we will contact her and try to get some of these answers on your behalf. But for the sake of time, I will plead that we let Dr. Janet go and give her a very big appreciation on behalf of the First Class Leaders Network and on behalf of everyone that is both here on YouTube and both here on Zoom, as well as on YouTube. And also, she actually dropped her email in the chat, so you can actually reach out to her if you think there is something. Oh, I remember I forgot to mention this during the introduction. For those of you who attended the Big Ten conference, I know you might have met her. And a couple of you told me you got your application fee waivers. So yes, you would have gone to that conference and got your waivers. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Janet, once more for making
You're
it up.
welcome. Thank you all so much. Great questions. I wish we had more time. I have to take my mother to the doctor, actually, so that's where I have to go. But I'll put my email one more time in the chat, and it's also on the first slide. So if you go to the presentation, you can find it on the first slide. And here it is one more time in the chat. Okay.
Yeah, and for those of you who signed up for this event, we are going to be sending the slides to you. Otherwise, you can always get it from the YouTube channel. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Janet.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yes,
Thanks,
bye-bye.
Sam.
Thank you.